Princess Diana's tragic threat to Prince Charles in early days of marriage revealed. Princess Diana once made a tragic threat to Prince Charles which exposed the heartbreak she was feeling during her tumultuous relationship with the heir to the throne, and unearthed occult claims. The Princess of Wales became one of the world's most recognizable faces as a result of her 1981 wedding to Charles. But behind the marriage was a plethora of rumor and scandal that saw both Diana and Charles plagued with allegations of infidelity. She was hounded by the press and many accounts claim she often found herself at odds with her new family, who were unable to warm to the woman dubbed the People's Princess. And in one devastating episode when she had quarreled violently with her husband, Diana threatened to take her own life, an author has claimed. The couple were renowned for falling out, such was their fiery relationship. Writing in his 1992 book Diana, Her True Story, author Andrew Morton exposed a unique insight into the Wales marriage, as he wrote up tapes sent to him by Diana herself, shedding light on the details. He wrote that Diana had struggled to get to grips with her newfound fame as she went from nobody to the Princess of Wales. Mr. Morton reported that Diana told her friends the change was just too much for one person to handle as the reality of stardom set in. He added, she had pleased, cajoled and quarreled violently as she tried to win the prince's assistance. In vain. On that January day in 1982, her first New Year within the royal family, she now threatened to take her own life. He accused her of crying wolf and prepared to go riding on the Sandringham estate. She was as good as her word. Standing on top of the wooden staircase she hurled herself to the ground, landing in a heap at the bottom. The Prince and Princess of Wales married in a traditional Church of England service at St. Paul's Cathedral in 1981. It was a fairy tale wedding and reached a global audience of 750 million people. Across the Commonwealth events were held to coincide with the special day. However, just over a decade later they separated. The couple officially divorced in 1996, a year before Diana was tragically killed in a Paris car crash. Ahead of her marriage to Charles, Mr. Morton also claimed that Diana's sisters Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Baroness Jane Fellows reacted with envy and concern. Desperate Prince Charles wanted to pull out of his wedding to Diana when he realized how incompatible the pair were, but knew breaking off the engagement would be cataclysmic. Bombshell book reveals. Prince Charles agonized over whether to call off his wedding to Diana, the Daily Mail can reveal today. Despite realizing that he and the aristocrat's daughter were incompatible, he felt powerless to do anything about it. Breaking off the engagement would have been cataclysmic, he said. And he described himself as being permanently between the devil and deep blue sea. Years later and still troubled by the tragedy of the marriage, he wept tears of frustration as he told friends, I desperately wanted to get out of the wedding in 1981, when during the engagement I discovered just how awful the prospects were. The story of the heir to the throne's anguish over the doomed marriage is told in an explosive new royal biography to mark his landmark 70th birthday next month. It reveals how Charles wants to challenge pernicious lies about him, which he believes were orchestrated by Diana herself. Veteran royal correspondent Robert Jobson, the book's author, has accompanied the prince for 18 months on tours around the world. Mr. Jobson, who has reported on the royals for almost 3 decades, has spoken to many current and former members of his staff, and to Charles himself. The result is a compelling book full of groundbreaking new material which is being serialized in the mail today and next week. Among the sensational revelations are how Charles is already Shadow King and the Queen could stand aside at 95, allowing him to become regent. How shocked Charles was by his son's level of belligerence. His dismay at being excluded from The Boys' 2017 documentary about Princess Diana. Harry's meltdown ahead of his wedding to Meghan Markle. How Charles talks to the dead, including Earl Mountbatten, his mentor murdered by the IRA. His disdain for Tony Blair, whom he once mockingly referred to as our magnificent leader. His despair at the Iraq War, telling friends Mr. Blair had behaved like George Bush's poodle. How he disagrees with the burqa bans introduced by France and other European countries. his distrust of U.S. evangelicalism and the lobbying power of giant American corporations. His fear that America's chemically ground corn was fueling that country's ever-growing obesity and diabetes crisis. Charles emerges from this powerful portrait as a contented figure, who is far from bitter but has strong views on some of the most vital issues facing us today. But it is the revelation about his heart take over Diana that is bound to raise eyebrows. Ever since Diana confided in biographer Andrew Morton, we have known that the princess wanted to back out of the marriage. But until now we had no idea that the prince did too. It is at times brutal reading as the book details Charles's sadness at his failure to confront what was to become an unfolding tragedy. Mr. Jobson says that the prince knew within just a handful of meetings they were ill-suited. He told friends how in the weeks leading up to the wedding, when he tried to explain his daily routine, Diana seemed incapable of grasping what he was saying. The more he saw her, the more he realized he was making a mistake. Charles said he blamed no one, neither his father nor his mother, for his inability to back out of the engagement. Instead he blamed his own failure to get to know Diana properly beforehand. The princess said they had met no more than 12 times before their engagement in February 1981. According to Mr. Jobson, the prince is haunted by sadness over the doomed marriage to this day. But in one regard the sorrow is matched by his fury at lies peddled about him. He blamed Diana for this, telling a friend of unbelievable and pernicious lies aided and abetted by somebody rather close to me, who lived hand to mouth with the press. The most hurtful lie that has echoed down the years was the claim that he had secreted the then unmarried Diana on board the royal train for a tryst. The story was untrue, as was another, that Camilla was smuggled into Buckingham Palace the night before his wedding to Diana. Other stories he labels lies and inventions include claims that Camilla had been pelted by bread rolls by shoppers in a store in Chippenham, Wiltshire. This, he describes as a persistent lie. Last night fellow biographer Penny Junor, who wrote a well-received book on Camilla last year, said, "This is the first time I have heard of Charles openly talking his doubts about marrying Diana while they were engaged. I certainly didn't know he had mentioned any misgivings to friends." Ingrid Seward, editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, said, "This effectively rewrites the Charles and Diana story with its significant interpretation that Charles as well as Diana felt the marriage was doomed from the beginning."